I'm a hunter, and I have concrete proof that I caught Bigfoot. I told my brother immediately when I caught him, but when he came over the next morning, I had suddenly vanished. What happened after I caught the Sasquatch is so terrifying, I'm not even sure if I can share this story on YouTube, but there is no turning back now. My name is Dale Pruitt. I'm 47 years old, and I have been hunting the Cascade Range for 23 years, whitetail primarily, and some elk. I know this country the way you know something you've spent 23 seasons inside of. Not perfectly, not completely, but well enough that when something is wrong, you know it before you can explain why. Something has been wrong in this part of the range for 3 years. I noticed it first in the fall of my 21st season. The deer movement was off, not depleted, not disease-related, not the kind of pressure shift you get from a new development or a logging operation, more like a displacement. The deer were avoiding a specific section of the drainage I had hunted for years, a bench of old growth above the creek, where the sign had always been heavy. That fall, the sign was thin. The following year, it was thinner. This year, the third year, I walked that bench for 4 days and found nothing. Not one track, not one rub. The deer had vacated a section of prime terrain, and I had no explanation for it. I had a suspicion. I did not say it out loud. I want to tell you what it is like to carry a suspicion like that for 3 years. A normal suspicion has an exit. You investigate, you confirm or deny, you move on. This suspicion had no clean exit. Every time I tried to investigate it, I arrived at the same place. Evidence of a cause I could not name and the particular discomfort of a practical person holding an impractical conclusion. I am a man who has hunted the same drainage for 23 years. What I had been observing was pointing at a word I had spent my whole adult life using as a punchline, and the evidence was not letting me put it down. I had been finding other things on that bench for 2 seasons, things that did not belong to any animal I was prepared to name. Prints first. I found the first one in the second year, pressed into the mud at the creek crossing below the bench. I knew it wasn't bear before I had finished looking at it. The shape was wrong. The stride pattern was wrong. And the size. I have a size 11 boot, and I put it beside the print, and the print was longer than my boot by 1/3 and wider by 1/2. I photographed it. I measured it. I went home and did not tell my wife what I had found. I had been reading Pacific Northwest accounts for 2 years. Late at night, the way you read things you are not ready to admit you are taking seriously. I knew the measurement ranges. What I was looking at in that mud matched precisely, and I was not ready to say what that meant. So I took the photograph and the measurement and drove home and did not say the word Bigfoot to anyone for another 12 months. The second year, I found 3 more prints and something else, a structure. I do not know what else to call it. A collection of branches, each one between 4 and 6 feet long, arranged in a pattern at the base of a Douglas fir on the upper bench. Not fallen, placed. The angles were deliberate. The branches had been broken, not cut, at consistent lengths, and they had been positioned with a care that no windfall or animal activity I knew could produce. I photographed the structure too. I told my brother about the structure that winter over a beer, and he said, "You know what that sounds like." I said, "Don't." He said, "I'm just saying." I said, "I know what it sounds like, and I'm not saying it." He finished his beer, and we moved on to other things, and I spent the next 11 months thinking about it. This was the 3rd year. I came in on October 9th with a plan. I had not shared the plan with anyone because the plan was the kind of plan that sounds reasonable alone in your truck at 2 in the morning, but sounds like something else entirely when you say it to another person. The plan was to find whatever was displacing the deer on the bench, photograph it, and deal with the consequences afterward. I had a trail camera, I had a rifle, I had 11 years of familiarity with this drainage, and I had 3 years of building suspicion that I was done not acting on. I set 6 cameras on the bench and the approach routes on the first day. High on the trees, better angles than I had used in previous seasons, overlapping fields of view, so there was no gap. I had learned something from the accounts I had read, accounts I had been reading for 2 years without admitting to myself why, and the thing I had learned was that you do not leave gaps. I went back to the cabin and I waited. Day 1 produced deer on 2 cameras and nothing on the others. Day 2, the same. Day 3, nothing on any of them. The deer pressure had dropped completely, and I took that as information the way I had learned to take the absence of deer as information on the bench. Day 4, camera 3 went dark at 2:18 in the morning. Not triggered, dark. The battery indicator had been showing full the night before. I checked camera 3 on my handheld unit, and the feed was just gone. No error code, no low battery warning, no motion trigger. Just a timestamp at 2:18 and then nothing. I sat with that for a while. Then I checked the other cameras. Camera 5 had a motion trigger at 2:22, 4 minutes after camera 3 went dark. The image on camera 5 was, I am going to describe this precisely because precision is the only thing I have to offer here. The image was a section of forest floor and lower trunk of a hemlock, and in the right-hand quarter of the frame there was a hand. A hand! Fingers and a palm pressed flat against the bark of the hemlock at a height of approximately 7 feet, in the process of, and I can only describe what the image shows, in the process of reaching for the camera. The image was the last thing camera 5 captured. I drove to the bench before first light the next morning. Camera 3 was on the ground. Placed, face up, in the grass below the tree it had been mounted on, the strap cut cleanly. Not torn, cut, with a precision that left both ends of the nylon strap clean. Camera 5 was on the ground in the same condition, strap cut, face up. The other 4 cameras were untouched. I stood at camera 5 for a long time, looking at the clean ends of the nylon strap. Whatever had taken those cameras down had a tool or had something that functioned as one. The cut was not a tooth mark or a tear. It was a single, clean separation. I put the cut end of the strap under my flashlight and looked at it for a long time and thought about what makes a cut like that. I went back to the cabin and I pulled the images from cameras 1, 2, 4, and 6. Camera 6 had captured something I had missed on the initial check. A motion trigger at 1:49 in the morning, 29 minutes before camera 3 went dark. The image was the approach trail from the north, in the dark, motion triggered at the near edge of the frame. What had triggered it was at the far right margin of the image, not centered, not clear. A vertical shape in the near dark that my brain kept trying to organize into something I had a name for. I could not find a name for it. I printed the image at the cabin, 11 by 14 on the portable printer I bring for scouting maps. I pinned it to the wall and I stood in front of it, and I looked at it for 2 hours. The vertical shape was the right side of something, the edge of a form that the frame had caught partially, the rest of it beyond the camera's field of view. The portion I could see suggested a height, and I am measuring this against the known dimensions of the trees in the background. That was not consistent with a human figure. The shoulder, if that is what I was seeing, was at a height that would require the figure to be between 7 and 8 feet tall. The surface of the visible portion had a texture that the camera, at that distance and in that light, was rendering as a dark mass with depth, not smooth, not clothing. I had been looking at Bigfoot photographs for 2 years. I knew what I was looking at. I went back to the bench on day 5 with 1 camera and a different plan. I placed the new camera lower, 4 feet off the ground, on the north approach, aimed at the creek crossing where I had found the first print 2 years before. Wide angle, night vision. I set it and I went back to the cabin and I loaded my rifle. I sat in the blind I had built on the second day, 20 yards from the creek crossing, with my rifle across my knees, and I waited. I want to be clear about what I was thinking in that blind. I was not thinking about shooting a Bigfoot. I have read enough accounts and spent enough time in this drainage to understand that whatever this was, it was not the kind of thing you shoot. What I was thinking about was documentation. I had partial images. I had a handprint on a camera and a shape at the edge of a frame. I needed something better. What I needed was a face. I sat in that blind from 8 in the evening until 1:30 in the morning. The temperature dropped to 22. I had a hand warmer in each pocket, and the rifle was cold across my knees, and the creek made its sound, and the forest was quiet in the particular way it went quiet in this drainage in the dark. The way I had learned to read over 23 seasons. Not the quiet of nothing present, the quiet of everything present and still. I want to tell you what 5.5 hours in a blind is like, because people imagine it as waiting. It is not. It is a specific form of attention, active, total, sustained, that uses everything your body has learned over decades in these mountains. You are receiving at maximum sensitivity, filtering everything through 23 years of accumulated knowledge. The cold helps. By midnight, I was cold to the bone, and my attention was as sharp as I could make it. At 1:40, I heard the creek change. Not a dramatic change, a subtle one. The particular shift in water sound that happens when something crosses, when the current has to move around a new obstacle. I have fished this creek for 11 years. I know that sound. Something was crossing. I did not move. I have spent 23 seasons not moving at the moment of approach, and the training was deeper than any conscious decision. I held the rifle, and I did not move, and I watched the creek through the gap in the blind wall. It came up the near bank. I am going to try to describe what I saw in that moment, and I am going to try to do it without the modifications that fear and shock produce, because I have had 6 days since then to process the image, and I believe I can now describe it close to accurately. It was large. The size of it against the creek bank, a bank I had measured and photographed and knew, put it at between 8 and 8.5 feet. The build was massive in the specific way of something that has never needed to fit through a door or worry about overhead clearance, a kind of scale that exists outside the reference points the human body uses to measure itself. The arms were too long. That is always the thing you notice first in the accounts, and I had always suspected it was description drift. Eyewitness error, the way traumatized memory exaggerates. It is not. The arms were too long in a way that was immediately apparent and immediately wrong, hanging to the knee when it stood fully upright. It moved up the bank and stopped. It was 10 yards from the blind. I could hear it breathing, the breath of it in the cold air, visible, a periodic cloud in the dark at a height that matched what I was seeing. The rhythm of it was slow, measured, not the panting of an animal that had been running. The breathing of something that had arrived at a place it intended to arrive at, and was now doing what it came to do. It stood there for 4 minutes. I timed it. 4 minutes of standing at the creek bank, 10 yards from where I was sitting, while I held the rifle across my knees and did not move. On the 4th minute, it turned its head, directly toward the blind. I do not know how it knew the blind was there. I had built it 4 days prior from natural materials, branches, deadfall, a section of camo netting I had brought in. I had been in it for 5.5 hours. By any measure I know, I was concealed. It looked at the blind for 60 seconds without moving. 60 seconds of direct, fixed attention on a specific point in the darkness, and the specific point was where I was sitting. Then it turned back to the creek. It crouched at the water, not kneeling, a different posture, a deep squat that put it low to the bank, and it drank. It drank from the creek the way an animal drinks, directly, and while it was down at the water, I raised my camera. I had the camera in my pack, not the trail camera, a digital camera, the one I use for scouting photographs, with a night mode I had tested in the cabin the night before. I had not planned to use it in the blind because taking it out of the pack would make noise, and noise in a blind is the thing you spend 23 seasons training yourself never to produce. I made noise. The zipper of my pack, small, a 1/4 inch of travel, the sound of it swallowed almost completely by the creek and the night. Almost. I got the camera clear of the pack, and I had it up, and I had my finger on the shutter, and it turned around. Not the slow pivot of an animal responding to sound, the fast, complete rotation of something that had been waiting for it. The head came around, and the body followed, and it was facing me at 10 yards, and it was fully upright, and it was looking at the blind. I took the photograph. One photograph. The flash fired. I had forgotten about the flash. In a blind at 10 yards in the dark, the flash is not a small thing. It is a white explosion, a full millisecond strobe that lit the creek bank and the trees and the thing standing in front of me, like a flare going off in a closed room. It did not run. I want to be specific about that, because running is what everything runs when a flash fires at 10 yards in the dark. Every animal I have ever photographed in a blind, every deer and elk and bear and coyote, runs when the flash fires. The startle response is not optional. It is wired below behavior. This did not run. It stood. It absorbed the flash the way a person absorbs a flash, with a flinch, a brief recoil, and then a return to stillness. And then it looked at me, not at the blind, not at the space where the flash had come from, at me. at the specific location of my face inside the blind, which it could not have seen before the flash illuminated everything, including me. Now it could see me. We looked at each other. I do not have a unit of measurement for what happened in the next 30 seconds. I have 23 seasons of sitting in blinds and waiting for animals, and I know what it is to be looked at by something wild, and I know the quality of that attention, the way an animal registers you as a variable in its environment, a stimulus to classify and respond to. This was not that quality. What was looking at me had organized my presence into something more specific than a stimulus. It had registered me as a particular kind of thing. The same kind of thing it was, perhaps, or a related kind, something that used blinds and cameras and rifles and sat in the dark for 5 hours waiting, something that had been waiting for it the same way it had been waiting for me. Then it turned and walked back to the creek and crossed and went into the trees on the far bank and was gone. I sat in the blind for 40 minutes without moving, not from strategy. I could not move. The thing that happens in the aftermath of extreme adrenaline is not dramatic. It is a stillness, a system shutdown, everything running a check to confirm it is still intact. I sat in the blind and ran the check, and at the end of it, I was intact, and the creek was still making its sound and the forest was quiet again. Then I made the decision. I do not know how to justify what I did next. I have spent every hour since trying to find the justification, and I cannot locate one that holds. What I can tell you is what happened, in the order it happened, because that is all I have to offer. I raised the rifle. It was still visible. On the far bank, moving into the tree line, the shape of it dark against the darker trees. 23 years of muscle memory put the scope on it, and 23 years of trigger discipline did the rest. I fired once. It went down. I am going to say that plainly because there is no other way to say it. I fired once, and it went down on the far bank, and the sound of the shot came back off the ridge, and then there was nothing but the creek and the cold, and what I had just done. I crossed the creek. The water was ice cold at the ford, and I barely felt it. What was on the far bank was not an animal. That is the honest sentence, and I am going to leave it there. The hands, the face, the proportions, everything I had suspected for 3 years was in front of me, and it was real, and it was dead, and I had made it dead, and I stood there with that for a long time. Then I took the head. I had tools in my pack. I am not going to say I planned this, because I do not fully know whether I planned it. I know that I had the tools, and I used them, and I worked in the dark for the better part of an hour, and I put the head in the bag I had in my pack, and I carried it back to the cabin, and I put it in the large cooler I had in the truck, and I locked the cooler, and I sat down at the kitchen table. It was 3:40 in the morning. I called my brother Gary at 6. His name is Gary. He is 51 years old. He has hunted with me for 20 years, and he is the person I trust above anyone else in my life. I told him I had something he needed to see. I told him it was proof. I said, "Gary, I have proof of Bigfoot, and you need to come out here today, and I need you to come alone and tell no one where you're going." He did not ask many questions. "That is Gary," he said. "I'll be there by 10. He was at the cabin by 10 Saturday morning. I showed him the head. Gary has hunted with me for 20 years. He has done the things a man who hunts this country does, and none of them had prepared him for what was in that cooler. He stood at the open lid, and I stood back and watched him go through the same sequence I had gone through alone in the dark at 3 in the morning. The initial read, the moment the brain tries to fit what it's seeing into something it already knows, the moment that fails. His hands were on the cooler lid, and he did not move them for 3 full minutes. When he finally spoke, he said, "Dale, what did you do?" Not a question, the statement of a man who already knows the answer and is trying to understand what it means for both of them. I said, "I know." He said, "We have to take this somewhere. We have to show someone." I said, "That's why I called you." We spent the afternoon going through the options. University researchers, wildlife agencies, the media. Each one had consequences we could see clearly and outcomes we couldn't predict. Gary made coffee. We talked through every version of what came next, and none of them resolved cleanly. Every path had a point where we lost control of what happened to it. We did not reach a decision. What we reached at about 9 in the evening was the point at which the conversation stopped mattering. It was Gary who heard it first. He stopped mid-sentence and looked at the north-facing window. Something was in the tree line. Not one something. The sounds were coming from the north side and the south side both. I had been in this drainage for 11 years, in all seasons, and I had never heard it produce sounds like these. Not wind, not any wildlife I could name. Structured, deliberate, the kind of sound that carries information the way speech carries information. With architecture, with intention, with a shape that is not the shape of something venting a feeling but the shape of something being communicated. I went to the north window. The tree line was dark beyond the porch light. The yard was empty. I stood there for 2 minutes and saw nothing. Then Gary said my name, quietly, from the south side of the room. I went to the south window. At the edge of the clearing, right at the border, where the porch light ended and the dark of the trees began, something was standing. Not the one I had shot. I knew that before I finished looking. The proportions were different. This one was taller, broader at the shoulder, carrying its weight differently. 8.5 feet, perhaps more, in the half-light at the tree line's edge. The reddish dark hair catching the yellow of the porch light along the crown. The arms at its sides, the hands open. I want to be specific about the hands. Open, not raised, not bald, not threatening. Hanging open at its sides the way hands hang when there is no aggression in them. It was looking at the cabin. It was looking at the south window. It was looking at me. Gary came and stood beside me. We looked at it together for a long moment. He said, very quietly, "There's another one." I said, "I know." He said, "Does it know what's in the cooler?" I said, "Yes." I knew that with a certainty I cannot fully account for. I knew it the way you know something that has been arriving at you slowly and finally lands all at once. It knew what was in the cooler. It had come because of what was in the cooler, and whatever was making the sounds in the tree line on both sides of the cabin, the structured sounds, the sounds with architecture, they were all here because of what I had done at the creek bank at 1:50 in the morning. Gary said, "We should go out." I did not argue. I have not been arguing with Gary for 30 years, and I was not going to start now. I told him I needed to write this down first, all of it, and he sat down across the table and waited, the way he has always waited for me when I needed to finish something. I have been writing for 2 hours. The shape at the tree line has moved. It is in the yard now, in the porch light, 30 feet from the cabin steps. Moving the way it moved up the creek bank that night. Wait and certainty, no hurry. The hands are still open. Every time I look up, it is closer, and its expression has not changed. The sounds from the north side have changed register. Lower now, slower, the way a conversation changes when the decision has been made, and what remains is the logistics. Gary has not spoken in 40 minutes. He is sitting across the table doing what we both do in a blind when something is close, completely still, receiving everything, deciding nothing yet. I have the photograph on the table in front of me as I write this. The image is sharp. The detail is sufficient. Anyone who sees this photograph will not be able to say it is inconclusive. This is not a shape at the edge of a frame. This is a Bigfoot face at 10 yards in a camera flash, and it is the clearest documentation of that face that has ever existed. And I know that, and I believe the things in the tree line know that too. I called my brother at 11:17 the night I took the photograph. I told him I had proof. I told him to come in the morning. I told him the address was on the envelope on the table and not to open it until he heard from me. He came. He is here. He has seen the proof. I am going to put this notebook on the table where someone will find it. I do not know what happens after that door opens. I have spent 23 years in these mountains, in the dark, in all weather, alone, and I have always trusted the country to be what it was. I am going to trust it now. Both of us are. Gary is putting on his boots. I have thought about what open hands mean. Not in human terms. I do not think human terms apply here, not fully, but I keep coming back to it. Open hands at the tree line, open hands across the yard, 30 feet from the porch steps, and still open. Whatever it is communicating, it chose that posture and has held it for 2 hours. Something is being offered, or something is being shown, and I am going to walk out that door and find out which one it is. What follows next from now is not written by Dale Pruitt. Gary's wife reported both men missing on Sunday afternoon when neither had returned calls. Authorities located the cabin on Monday morning. The notebook was on the kitchen table, open to this page. The photograph was beside it. One photograph, flashlit, in focus, exactly as described. The cooler was on the floor. It was empty. The back door of the cabin was open. There were no signs of struggle inside. Outside, in the frost-stiff grass of the cabin yard, investigators found 2 sets of boot prints leading from the porch steps toward the south tree line. Both sets reached a point approximately 20 feet from the tree line. Both sets stopped. There were no prints leading back. At the point where the boot prints ended, the ground was disturbed in a way that the initial report described as consistent with a large animal. The deputy who wrote that line later amended it. He could not identify a large animal with a footprint that size. The notebook was taken into evidence. The photograph was taken into evidence. Neither Dale Pruitt nor Gary Pruitt has been found. The case remains open. The lead investigator, in an interview 3 months after the disappearance, said only this: whatever was at that cabin that night, it came for something specific, and it left with more than it came for. He did not elaborate. The cabin has been empty since October. The porch light still runs on its timer, on at dusk, off at 2 in the morning. The road to it is gated now. No one has reported anything unusual in the drainage since the disappearance. The forest is quiet. That might mean something, or it might mean the thing that needed to happen out there has already happened, and the forest has moved on. And whatever Dale and Gary walked toward when they opened that door is not something the forest is going to explain. The photograph is in an evidence locker in a county sheriff's office in eastern Washington. If you know what you're looking at, you know what it shows. If you don't, look again.